everybody. It's Lynne Magnavite with Magnavite Communications, and it is MC Live, the interview series, real talk from real people who have real strategies on how to communicate in this crazy world. So I've been wanting to interview Scott Saxe, so I decided to create a show called the Interview Series. Really and truly.
I became a catalyst for this?
You did. I have met so many interesting people in my life, and I just feel that it's important to share some of the strategies that certain people have, and Scott is one of those people. Scott has over 25 years of experience in technology and personnel and business management, and he is, I call him a powerful communicator because he really and truly has a very engaging and calm and, well, you'll see, way of communicating and sharing. I am thrilled to be able to talk to Scott today, and I know you guys are going to learn so much about this very important topic of dealing with difficult situations, having difficult conversations. But before that, I just want to say that Scott is an advocate. He's a connector, which is why we're a cohabiting company, because he has incredible connections throughout the area. He's an entrepreneur. He has his own company, Saxe Enterprises, and also is the CEO of Charity Resources. But the thing about Scott is he is an advocate. He's your cheerleader. He's a support system, and he writes incredible LinkedIn posts and knowledgeable. He's a teacher, but he's not in front of the camera. Very rarely do we see him. So I'm excited that we get to show him off.
And today, apparently, I'm the coach to the coach. Is that?
Yeah, you a coach to the coach.
Coach to the
I
coach.
like that. Coach to
I'm
the
going to
coach.
have to rebrand myself.
I think you might have to. So let's jump in. First question: how do you define difficult?
Oh, how do I define difficult? You should ask my wife. I would think, because she's probably better tell you what's difficult, since I probably define that sometimes. In the context of conversation and communication, I would think that difficult is somebody who doesn't want to communicate, right?
Yeah.
Who has an idea, who has a thought, who's spoken something and then doesn't want to back it up with anything.
Right.
To me, that's the difficult conversations.
Right.
I think there's difficult people at times, but more often there's difficult topics, difficult subjects. The difficult people, I think, are more rare. There's always a way to communicate with somebody.
Yeah, and I think that was my key to the conversation. Right before we talked, we had this like brief chat about, is it difficult people or is it the difficult situation that's the problem? And I think we could have a completely different conversation on another day about what it's like to be a difficult person. That's just being self-aware and having emotional intelligence enough to know that one day somebody could be in a crappy mood and appear to be difficult. I want to focus more on the situations. You are in the middle of a meeting and somebody is being obstinate. Can you help walk us through? You've been there before. It's either a boss, it's a client, it's a colleague.
Yeah.
What is that type of scenario? And what can you do?
Sometimes it's you, right? So
no.
I think, sometimes it's me.
Okay, Scott.
So, and I think that's where I learned it from. So I was one of those people who was probably the difficult communicator. So at times in meetings, I would hear somebody speaking, either asking a question or commenting on something, and I was already thinking about what my response was going to be. I wasn't really listening to what they had to say. I was kind of already preparing my remarks, and they were getting tuned out. I was just waiting for that gap to jump in. I was a difficult one. I recognize that today, and it took a lot of training, a lot of coaching, a lot of mentoring for me to learn what most of us do wrong, which is we listen to respond. We don't really listen to learn. And so for me, that was the eye-opener, was really paying attention to what somebody is saying to me and taking the time to process that and to learn from it, whether I'm learning something new or just learning their perspective, or trying to figure out what's driving this comment, this question, this attitude right now.
Right.
To take that moment.
It's like public speaking, right? How many of you have the answer in your mind when you're talking with somebody? You either have the answer in your head, or you've already moved on and you're either writing your grocery list, or you've gone to the next question, or you're not really engaged. So it's that active listening part that's really super important at
being
this
present
point.
in the conversation.
Being present in the moment. I talk about that a lot. That's from my theater training, being in the moment and really responding to body language, responding to actual words coming out of your mouth.
And the tone.
Voice.
The tone.
Yeah.
Well, the body language, I think, is big, right?
Yeah.
And I know, again, if I can look back at some of the meetings that I've had with clients and with colleagues in the past of, really the aggressive stance, I'm leaning forward, I'm kind of ready to pounce,
Right.
versus being more open to and receptive to what somebody's telling me and what somebody's asking of me, to really know how to take that and respond appropriately to it.
Right. When you're in that situation, when you're dealing with somebody who is just being completely obstinate, you feel like you're hitting your head against the wall. How do you break through?
I wish there was a magic wand that you could just wave to make that happen. So sometimes it's really almost repeating back to them a little bit of what they've said, right? To affirm that you've heard it right. What I'm hearing from you is this, and coming back with that to make sure that you're really getting it the right way, and that they're also hearing what you're sending back to them. Because sometimes what we say is, the intention is missed in the conversation. So I think trying to at least keep that dialogue going on a friendly level, on an open level, is important. There are times it's just as easy to move on to that next topic, though, too, because sometimes you get people who we're stuck on a conversation, we're stuck on a topic, and can't move past it. And so when you're faced with that encounter of just being, the answer is no, and it's no, and you're not getting past it, it's okay to move on to the next thing. We don't have to walk away and completely disengage. We can push that to the side and step up to the next topic.
Right. So what if it's a client and you don't want that no?
Well, I've always said with my clients, it's no is always an opportunity for yes somewhere in the future. So it's
that's tweetable.
It is tweetable. It fits in there perfectly. I think it's really true that it's a sales process, right? It's a relationship process, it's a learning process that we are always, hopefully with our clients, engaged in some way. So I think it's important not to make the break entirely, but to continue conversations around whatever subjects we're working on. So there is that opportunity to come back somewhere in the future and get that yes, or further the conversation. Sometimes that difficult thing is just in the moment, like you said earlier. I'm having a bad day. Whatever's happened outside of that room, we don't really know what the environment was before.
Right.
So sometimes just re-engaging at a different time completely changes the tone and the conversation.
Does this happen to you? So somebody just immediately just dismisses you, and again, you may have known this person, for a long time, or a boss or a friend or a family member who just dismisses you, and you're like, what is your instant instinct to do?
And it's hard not to, right?
That anger.
None of us want to feel
like,
dismissed.
how dare you? You've attacked me, or you've affected me or offended me. How do we get beyond that?
And I've lived it and I've watched it in others too. So every year with the American Heart Association, you mentioned I'm an advocate. So I advocate for people. I advocate for causes, mostly health causes. So every year with the Heart Association, I bring a group of college students, now some high school students, down to Springfield. In the morning, we do a whole session on the legislative process and some of the bills that are coming through the House or through the Statehouse, and how to communicate with your legislator, how to work with them, how to take that no and turn it into something else, or sometimes just accepting it and moving forward. So earlier this year, we had a group of students that we did something just like this, right? How to communicate, talked about issues. And I had a small group that we brought to their legislator's office, and we were in with a senator, and we were talking about two things. And one of them was a tobacco bill, and one of them was a physical education in schools bill. And the young woman who was the constituent of this representative starts the conversation. Thank you for meeting with us, and I appreciate the time. And I'm a student here, and here's what I'm here to talk about. And before she could even finish talking, saying tobacco, he put his hand up and said, "That's going to be a non-starter with me. What else do you have?" And I think all of us in the room were kind of, taken aback a little bit. It's politics. We see that happen often, but still, for students, usually they get a little bit more respect than that.
Right.
So it was a little bit surprising. It was certainly very surprising for her, and you could see the reaction on her face. But she recovered very quickly because we'd practiced for things kind of like that. Maybe not as abrupt, but we practiced, and she quickly pivoted to the next subject and talked about her passions around physical education and the importance of health in students.
Okay.
And very well engaged the senator on the subject. He actually was a former school teacher, so it was something that he could really speak personally about. And so they built this great rapport around education, around students, around health, around kind of common sense legislation to help and not being like this overbearing government entity. And from that, was able to really pivot right back into the tobacco conversation and enlighten him in ways that He opened up to a conversation I just don't think he was really willing to have in the very beginning, but at the end, probably spent 15 minutes talking with us about a subject he didn't want to engage on.
Okay, so the scenario is close. Then she opened it by relating to something because she did her homework. So she know your audience, which is what I always say is the number one thing about communication. So she knew her audience. She then related back to him. He then responded in kind. You could tell he responded by
and they
his
built
body
this
language.
Foundation around education, and yes, body language completely changed from a hard stop, we're not talking about this,
to relax
and open and talking about his experiences as a teacher and hers as a student, and how, finding some common ground that they can build upon.
So then you pivot, and then you sneak it back in.
Sneak it back in, because as the door opens around health and around the subject that he was willing to engage in, it really did segue very nicely into the rest of it, which for him, we were the difficult conversation. I mean, in hindsight, we walk in talking about something he didn't want to talk about. We were the ones being difficult. I want to talk about this, and he said no. But when he realized that how we were talking about this was very different than what he imagined, I would assume, he was very willing to engage in that.
So it was, this feels like it's a combination of organic in the moment, because you, exactly what you said before, you have to be willing to listen and react accordingly. But it's also know your person, do your homework, and have those plan Bs, right? So I imagine that you taught in your class to these students, they had to have a plan B.
There's always a plan.
Because you can't, as you said, you can't just let it die. Because then it would be a very dull conversation. Dull conversation.
And unfortunately, sometimes those do happen, right? Especially in Springfield or in other state capitals, right? It can happen that if that's all they came to talk about was the one thing, and somebody says, "Nope, I'm not going to talk about that." There's only so much pushing you can do, right? You can pivot to something else and talk about, being a constituent, talk about where I grew up, talk where I went to school, make some. I think it's really about building that relationship, because it may not be a conversation you can have today, but you can build upon that little foundation and have it tomorrow, and follow up on that in a different way. And sometimes the nonverbal communication in the future works better than the verbal, right? The physically in front of you, talking and being face to face and having that difficult topic. Maybe I follow up about it in an email.
We all have our different personalities. I happen to be a lot more passionate than some. I know a lot of you are similar, and you just want to tell somebody they're doing something wrong. You're wrong, Scott. What you're telling me is absolutely wrong. How do you then?
How do you take that? Turn that into a positive?
Scott, you are 100% wrong. And is it just kind of like that similar, open door pivot conversation?
Sometimes it is, right? Sometimes it's accepting that fact that maybe I am wrong in that moment, and sometimes it's also in context, right? Who's telling you that? Is it somebody that you've got an existing relationship with that really knows you better than maybe you know yourself? Is it somebody that's at work that is a colleague but you really don't know all that well? Is it your legislator who you just met for the first time and you walked into that office? So that the context of the relationship is also, I think, key into how do you react to it. If my wife tells me I'm doing something wrong, it's probably a very different response that I give than if it's my legislator.
Exactly. Is there ever a lost cause? Like 100% lost cause. You have done everything you could possibly do. You've tried your best.
And
you've plan B, your plan C.
All the way down to
you've pivoted, so you're circling.
Done everything you can possibly do.
You've been watching this person.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think sometimes there are, and I think most of those are around the people who they don't want to engage on any level.
Yeah.
Right. I've said something. Right. This is my stance. This is my belief. Or maybe it's just no. I don't want to listen to you. And there's no way. There's no barrier you can get through on that. There's no chink in the armor that you can open up something. They don't want to engage on a personal level. They don't want to engage on on anything other than I'm saying this, and whether that's the hard no or this is what I believe, and take it or leave it. The people who don't want to engage in some way, I think those are the most difficult people, the most difficult topics, and the most difficult. I hate to call them conversations because there's really not a conversation when it's so one-sided. But those are the ones that it's frustrating to have to step away from. But sometimes that's the best thing that you can possibly do. those are the ones that are frustrating for me.
Yeah, I know. I am like, never give up, never give up.
I think I'm probably one of those same people, and you will always want to find some way to make a connection.
Right.
I mean, for me, it's not about the moment as much as it is about the relationship. That you can't advocate for a cause, you can't connect people and causes or companies. That you can't do all these things without building long-term relationships. So it's about finding those people that you can relate to. It's finding those common grounds, even the people that you disagree with or that disagree with you. And when you have somebody who just doesn't want to engage on any level to build a relationship at all, that's difficult.
So what is your process for when you have, now you're delivering bad news? So you're going to have a difficult conversation. You are going to have to deliver that conversation to an audience, and it's bad news. And what is your preparation process? And of course, it depends.
Right.
So say the scenario is you have to tell people that, sorry, the budget is not what we think it is. So we're going to have to lay off a few people. How would you do that?
And it have unfortunately been there, right? Whether that's been layoffs from a merger, from any number of things. So business decisions and impacts of financials on those things, they're always difficult. And I think the important thing to always remember with this is numbers they're numbers, but the underlying piece to this is these are real people. These are people's lives. These are the impact on their family, their children, their livelihood, their well-being. So I think that stepping back from the numbers of it, right? A lot of times those things make a lot of sense when you're looking at the spreadsheet and you go, yeah, we don't have this, therefore we have to cut that. From a numbers perspective, from a logic perspective, cut and dry. But there's nothing cut and dry dealing with people. So I think it's taking those moments to realize, that to have that empathy for who these people are, what they've meant for you and for your business or the organization, and understand what it would be if it was happening to you. And trying to, and again, having run a business that has gone through some of that, looking at how do we make this the easiest, the most difficult transitions when you're letting somebody go from a job for no good reason, no reason of their own other than it's a financial or a business decision, making sure that not only are you empathetic to their side of it, but how can you help with that transition, making sure the resources are there to move into something else, making sure that you've thought about transitioning out in a way that's, it's not abrupt and brusque and we're being respectful to them.
Right. So empathy is key. Empathy is key.
Always key.
And knowing your audience, empathy is key, no matter what the difficult topic is. But you have to go in there with a plan. You can't, I don't know if you've experienced it, if, regardless of, being laid off or just given bad news about something, whatever it is, you still have to be prepared going in to talk to your audience.
And I think just having that underlying, that respect, that empathy for others, I think that helps with anything, whether that's personal news or business news or, stock market news. It doesn't matter what it is, you can react to those situations a little bit better if you're really being respectful of the person that you're speaking with and being empathetic to their side of the
so you're talking to a group of people, you're telling them, there may be layoffs in the future and you're getting questions. How do you then, I know this is a completely different topic, but it's sort of like, it comes back to you.
For me, honesty is the best policy, right? So being as forthcoming, being as transparent as possible, you've made these decisions, you have to own those decisions too. So I think being able to answer with complete transparency about the whys makes it a little bit more real, and it's not the excuse of, well, the numbers don't let this happen. There has to be a story, and I think there has to be some open dialogue around why this is happening and why it's happening to this group, right? What's caused this to happen, and look at the bigger picture. It's very difficult being on the other side to say, okay, logically it might make sense, but it's still me, right? It's still a very, very personal thing for me, and I think no matter what we say, no matter what we do, it's still going to be a very emotional thing. So I think the more honest and open you can be in that conversation, just the better it is. Nothing will help ease the pain for somebody who's losing their job or losing income. But I think the more approachable that you are, the more respectful that you are, the more transparent that you are, it makes it easier to cope with it.
Yeah. I think what I'm hearing from pretty much all of the conversation that we're having today is, number one, know your audience. Number two, in the moment, be in the moment, be present. Number three, have empathy.
And listen.
And listen to the other person. And being transparent, be honest, authentic, credible.
Well, again, going back to that listening to learn piece, right? I'm listening to hear what you're saying and really digesting that and taking it from your perspective, right?
Right.
If I can put myself in your shoes and hear what you're saying and validate that back with you, that this is what I hear you saying,
okay.
and am I right? It again, you feel validated for you're speaking it, you know I've heard it, and now we have this basis of how do we take from here and move forward.
So really difficult conversations really have to do, active listening, difficult conversations, they go hand in hand. When you teach your students, when you go to the state and lobby, what are some of the other tactics that you teach them?
For them, a lot of that is just, it's not even the difficult conversation, it's just engaging in the conversation, right? So for people who are taking their first step into the political process, it can be daunting. You're in a very imposing building filled with elected officials that there tends to be, for first-time visitors, first-time advocates, to really be very deferential. And I think the first thing that we try and really get through everybody's head is that our elected officials are just, they're people like you and I. They just happen to have run for office and they've won, but they still, they have families, they have fears, they have doubts, they have questions, they don't know everything. They're not these omnipotent beings, they're just normal folks. And so I think a lot of it is really just letting them know that you can have a conversation. It's just like talking to your neighbor. Just because your neighbor's a legislator doesn't, not to diminish the importance, but it doesn't make them any more or less than anybody else is. So I think just being okay to have that conversation. And usually the first one is tough on everybody, right? That people, it's like getting starstruck to some degree. That's the first thing I notice. Doesn't matter if they're talking to the legislator or a legislative assistant. It's people forget their names, they forget where they came from, they get completely dumbfounded, and then you hit your groove and move on from there.
I think you can say that pretty much about anything. A new client,
Sure.
You completely forget. What? And anybody that you're communicating with, so I think that's valid. Yeah.
It can be difficult.
Yes,
Yeah.
it does. Say you're being attacked, not physically, but
okay.
verbally.
Verbally attacked.
Somebody is nonstop in your face, yelling at you. Customer service people perhaps may know this very well. I don't like this product. This is terrible. Blah 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 blah. And if you've been on the other end of my conversations at some telecommunications companies, perhaps, no, just kidding, but seriously, I mean, I had people yelling at me in my life, and how do you then take that and respond to that person without, stop it?
Well, maybe that's the first thing, right? I mean, at some point, there has to be that stop it. There has to be something that brings it back down to a level that you can communicate at. I guess maybe I'm fortunate that have I really been in a line of work where I get yelled at all the time? Maybe I should knock on wood at this point. I'm not sure that I've really been there. I mean, I've certainly had difficult conversations and people who have taken a position very much against wherever I'm standing. But the yelling, like that almost physical intimidation
because
piece.
They're so angry.
It's maybe a little harder for me to say because I've not really been, at least that I can think of right now, directly in that. But I think it's, again, that I think the important piece is to let somebody speak, right? Let them vent. I might not be able to help right now. I might not be able to answer that question right now. I might not be able to calm them down right now, but sometimes they just need that, that valve to open and let that steam out. And again, listen, empathetic piece, and reiterate what you're hearing from them without the expletives and without the anger, but the underlying piece. When my cable is out, we're all angry. When we call the provider, we're all angry about something, and it tends to come out in a much more agitated way. But the underlying piece is my internet's not working. Right? I can't watch my baseball game or my football game. Something has got me fired up. But there's always that piece that if I can boil it back down to that, how do I fix that? How do I address that?
So I feel, and again, circling back to everything you're saying, we have to be, how do we learn this self-awareness, emotional intelligence? What can we do? Because I know that's not necessarily the first instinct for all of us, is to wait for if somebody's screaming at you, I don't know that may not be your first instinct is to let them diffuse,
no, first instinct is to jump back in their face.
But if you do the opposite, I mean, it makes so much sense, everything you're saying. So how do we learn? What do we do? You really want to say something so badly,
but you can't.
Right?
I mean, especially, look, if you're a customer service agent, you can't hang up the phone, right? If you're a customer service agent like physically in front of somebody who's making a return or has a defective. You can't just shut the door, turn and walk away.
No.
And for us, with clients, with friends, neighbors, it's rude to just pick up and turn. It's just as rude, I suppose, to be yelled at like that.
Of course.
We can't just pick up and shut down. And it's way easier to sit here in this nice calm space, this beautiful space, and talk about those situations than it is to actually do this in practical.
Absolutely.
That, if somebody's yelling at us, pausing to say, okay, I'm going to take this. I'm going to get yelled at for a few minutes, and that's okay. I'm going to listen to what they have to say and process it and be respectful. It's next to impossible. And whether that's in person or it's over the phone, that's a really, really difficult thing to do. At some point, though, I think we fuel the fire by pushing back.
Yeah.
So,
very important.
if you can take that step back, which is a challenge, I will be the first to admit, and I will be the first to admit that, when pushed, the first instinct is absolutely to push back. We're standing our ground.
Right.
You're not going to talk to me like that. I'm going to raise my voice. The posture changes. Everything changes. But I think, in practicality, if we can sit and say, okay, you know what, I can stop. I can take a moment to listen. And at some point, there's also that moment where you might have to disengage. It might not be the easiest thing to do at work, but I know pretty much every customer service center has a policy around really angry and rude customers.
Sure, I imagine. Of course
you
they
can
do.
always, there's always that, I'm trying to help, I'm here to listen, but if you continue to yell, if you continue to swear, if you continue to be aggressive with me, I'm going to have to disconnect.
Right.
And I think that's important too, is that we're not here to just be beat up on.
Correct.
In the customer service example, we're trying to provide that level of service. The customer's got to give us some of that too.
That is key. We're not here to be beat up on, however, we're here to help you. So let's find that common ground again. Let's go back. Let's open the door again. Let's find the common ground. Let's pivot and then see if we could, make it. I love this. Scott is very good at responding to written comments. And so, of course, we've all experienced the social media right now. If we even talk politics, it's just becomes explosive. So I tend to just not respond unless I know it's a like-minded person. I tend to never respond to anything on social media. But if you get an email, say you get an email from a client that's very, kind of an angry email or a caustic email, what are some of the steps? I mean, social media aside, I think we all can agree that perhaps not engaging right away might be a good thing. But what if, and you could talk about that too, and also you get this terrible email from a client that accuses you of something. What do you do?
So I think you hit the nail right on the head though. It's so social media or email, any type of communication that's not direct, when I'm sitting right across from you, it does give you that time to actually sit back and read it and walk away from it and come back and read it again and really formulate your response and craft it in a way that's going to be meaningful for everybody.
Yeah.
I am the first to admit social media in particular, where you can get up in the morning or in the evening, whenever, and take a look at your feed, and there's all kinds of things that are inflammatory that you want to respond to, and it's taken me a long time to figure out that I'm not just going to pound out at the keyboard and write my response.
Right.
I think I need to take a moment and formulate something that's not going to fuel the fire a little bit more. And I think emails back to clients in particular, we've all seen those, where there's something, we're being accused of something, or there's something wrong or incorrect, and instead of jumping back in to just respond and be a little short perhaps in our responses, you can take that time. I like to just step away. My favorite thing is put the phone down, put the computer down, whatever, just walk away and deal with something else and come back to that. Because your attitude is very different the second time around.
Yeah.
I had a colleague I used to work with, and he used to call it, the Oreo. So he said, when you're responding, he says, you get the nice cookie on. So the first is, good morning. I hope you're having a wonderful day. It was a pleasure seeing you yesterday. The pleasantries, and then we get to, maybe it's more of a sandwich than it is the Oreo, but still, you get to the, the center of, here's the issue, right?
Right.
I didn't say that, or I did ship that, or this is really what happened. And then you finish it up with the nice cookie again, the nice cookie at the end. So you've got this beautiful little Oreo, or the nice sandwich that, and it really, it works.
Yeah.
And it works, I think, for two reasons. Because when people are reading that, they're getting that feel-good piece, and then they're dealing with, whatever the substance is, and there's a little bit of feel-good to close.
Right.
But I think that comes across because as you're writing it too, there's a deliberate thought process around doing that. It's not just that short, angry response. It's really, okay, I'm gonna write my little Oreo.
that. I would eat that Oreo too. Do you have any, just key things you want to share with the audience? Just, a couple of things just to remember besides the, kind of the being in the moment, the active listening, the finding the common ground, pivoting, and trying to, end it on a positive. That's
did you just take my?
Did I just? I think I just did it.
I really think the listening piece is critical. I could learn to live from my own advice sometimes because we're not perfect beings, so I certainly don't always listen myself, but I think that is probably the most important thing of this is take that moment to truly listen and listen to learn something new or read to learn something new. I mean, it could be something you're seeing on social media, like you said, that, okay, they might not agree with my perspective, and frankly, maybe what they're saying is something that just doesn't resonate with me at all, but it resonates with them.
Right.
And so take a moment, read through it, understand a little bit more of that perspective. Take a moment to read, to listen, to learn. And if you're going to respond, you can formulate your response from there, but do that from a point of knowledge versus a point of just reaction.
Yeah. I think you really have to practice this. This is not second nature to probably 99% of people.
And maybe even more.
And
it's certainly not even second nature to me. I mean, this is something that's
learned
taken
behavior.
a long time to do.
So if you have any questions for Scott, I would love for you to put them in the comments.
Please.
If there's any follow-up that you'd like, put it in the comments, or if it's too personal, private message me, and we could come up with a win-win solution for you. In the meanwhile, how can we get a hold of you, Scott? Because Scott really is my guest.
I am Scott Saxe everywhere, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Twitter.
And I would suggest following him on LinkedIn because he has these nuggets of wisdom that he shares, maybe daily, maybe every other day. But these nuggets of wisdom are like little blog posts, and they're very, very valuable. I follow him consistently, so I think he's fabulous. I'm so excited that we got to talk about this because lots of good information. My brain is brimming with lots of cool things that I can use today. I'm happy to help you in any way, and I know Scott is too.
Absolutely.
We're here for you. We're communication, the coach for the coach. That's our new business. All right.
Thank you, Lynne.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Communicate well.